The burning sheet landed on the skirt before anyone in the room moved. Marissa Pierce, 29, a black couture seamstress with her own atelier, had spent 10 years on that gown. 1,900 beads, set one at a time, by hand. She called it Eternité. She only put it on the floor because the rent went up 40% overnight. A woman in bone white walked in that afternoon and pointed at it without looking at anything else. Seo Yerin paid in full. She booked the fitting for the next morning at the hillside house of Kang Tae-jun, the Snow Wolf. A black dragon inked up the right side of his neck, collar open so everyone could see it. Marissa delivered the gown herself. You're looking at her? The fitting turned into a dissection. 3 of her employees watched. A small camera blinked on Delilah's shoulder the whole time. Then the fireplace. Then the flame on 10 years of silk. Tae-jun smothered it with his own hands. He heard what she said next, and by that night he had done something no one in either family thought possible. But nobody in that room knew why Yerin walked past every other gown and chose that one. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Marissa Pierce pulled the thread taut and cut it with her teeth, because the shears were 4 feet away and she had stopped trusting her legs an hour ago. The hem was 1 inch from finished. 1 inch, after 10 years. She sat on the floor of the atelier with the skirt spread across her knees, the dress form above her wearing the rest of it, like a woman holding her breath. Her lamp was the only light on the whole block. Outside the window, the street was still that flat blue that comes before anyone has decided the day is real. She threaded the needle again. Her hands were steady. Everything above her wrists had gone quiet 6 hours ago. The last inch took 11 minutes. She counted the stitches out of habit, 41, and the 41st she pulled twice, because the first pass sat a hair proud of the line. Nobody alive would have seen it. She saw it. Then she stopped. She put the needle down on the boards beside her hip. She sat there with her palms open on the silk. 1,900 beads. She had set every one by hand. The oldest were in the bodice, from a spool she bought at 22 with money she did not have, in a shop that closed a year later. The newest were along the left hip, set 8 days ago, in a color she had spent 2 months chasing, because nothing in any catalog held light the way she needed it to. She had never named a dress before. This one had named itself somewhere around year 4, Eternité. Marissa stood. The dress came up with her, and she carried it to the form and lifted the skirt onto the pins, and stepped back to the far wall where the mirrors caught it from 3 sides. She looked for a long time. Then she said out loud in an empty building, "Okay." The front door chimed at 7:10. Delilah Frost came in with 2 coffees and a folder under her arm, and she stopped 4 steps inside and looked at the form. "You finished it. 4:20 this morning." Delilah set both coffees on the cutting table without looking away from the dress. The dimple in her left cheek never showed unless she smiled, and it did not show now. She crossed the floor and walked a slow circle around the form and stopped where the light hit the hip. "That blue cost me 2 months. It moves." Delilah leaned in without touching, hands behind her back, the way she'd been taught. "Marissa, it moves. And it's not even on a body." That was the idea. Delilah straightened. She reached back for the folder she'd tucked under her arm, then didn't hand it over. She held it against her chest. Marissa saw that. "Say it. Drink the coffee first." Delilah. Delilah handed her the folder. It was 1 page on top. Thick paper, a letterhead Marissa didn't recognize. She read the first paragraph standing up. She read the second sitting on the stool by the cutting table. The building had been sold in March. The new holding company had reviewed the lease. Effective the 1st of next month, rent on the ground floor commercial unit at 214 Adler Street would be adjusted to reflect current market valuation. 40%. She turned the page over as if there might be more. There was more, but it was a schedule of payment dates, which was worse. Kat saw it come in yesterday, Delilah said. She put it on my desk instead of yours. She wanted you to finish. Marissa didn't answer that. She was doing arithmetic. 11 years in this room. Payroll for 6 people, 4 of them full-time. Silk on order for 2 spring commissions, already paid for, already cut. The number at the bottom of the schedule was not a number she could reach by working harder, and she had spent a decade solving every problem by working harder. There's a second thing, Delilah said. Of course there is. Delilah took the letter back and slid a smaller envelope out from underneath. Cream. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Marissa knew the shape of it before she opened it. The first one had come in October, the second in January. She opened it anyway. Same offer. Same language, same blank line at the bottom where her signature would go, and the same clause 4 paragraphs down that she had read 3 times back in October, because it had taken her 3 times to believe what it said. The purchaser would acquire the trade name, the archive, the client list, and the design rights. Ms. Pierce would be retained as creative consultant for a period of 36 months. Retained. In her own house. Same people? Delilah asked. No name. Just the lawyers. Marissa folded it back along its own crease. 3rd time, they went up. They went up, Marissa agreed. She held the envelope for a second longer, then put it face down on the table. 20% above January. Delilah did the math on her face. That's more than the shop's worth. Yes, Marissa, that's more than the shop is worth. I know what it's worth. I built it. Marissa picked up the coffee at last, and her hand was steady on the cup, and that steadiness cost her something. Nobody pays over the number for a dress shop, Delilah. Then what are they paying for? Marissa looked at the front window, at the street, at the empty storefront across it that had been a bookbinder for 30 years and had been empty since December. Ask me tomorrow, she said. The girls came in at 8. Catherine Vance first, glasses shoved up into the ash blonde bob, needle already parked in her lapel like she'd slept in the smock. She stopped in front of the form the same way Delilah had. She took the glasses down off her head and put them on properly and got in close to the bodice, close enough to fog the silk. The old spool, Catherine said. Yeah. You had 11 of those beads left in 90. Catherine stopped herself. You had 11 left. I have 4. Catherine straightened up. Her eyes were doing something behind the lenses, and she turned away before Marissa could name it, and busied herself with the steamer. Cat. I'm fine. Cat. I've been here 9 years, Catherine said, to the steamer. I've watched you put that thing away every time a client walked in. Every single time. 9 years of you throwing a sheet over it. She turned around. You're not going to put a sheet over it now. No, Marissa said. I'm not. Marissa went to the back and washed her face in the utility sink and came out with her sleeves rolled and the measuring tape already over her shoulder. There was a client at 9. There was always a client at 9. Mrs. Ellingham wanted the waist taken in a 1/2 inch and had wanted the waist taken in a 1/2 inch 3 times already, and Marissa knelt on the fitting room floor and pinned it a quarter and said nothing at all, and Mrs. Ellingham looked in the mirror and said that was it. That was exactly it. Why hadn't they done that the first time? We did, Marissa said. You weren't ready to see it. Mrs. Ellingham laughed. She wrote a check on the way out and added $40 to it for the girls, and Marissa thanked her and held the door and watched the car pull away and then stood on her own step for a second in the cold. 2 doors down, a man in a windbreaker was taking photographs of the building. not of anything, of the building. He shot the facade, then the upper windows, then the loading gate in the alley. He held a phone at chest height and read from it between shots. Marissa watched him work his way to the corner. He never once looked at the shop. She went back inside. By 10, the floor was working. 2 fittings in the front room, the pressers going in the back, the radio low on the station Catherine liked, and nobody else did. Marissa moved through it the way she always did, hand on a shoulder here, a pin repositioned there, and she did not go into her office and she did not sit down. At 11, she went into the office and sat down. She opened the ledger. Not the software, the ledger, the actual book. Because 11 years ago she couldn't afford the software, and by the time she could, she'd stopped being able to think in anything else. She ran her finger down the right-hand column. She turned back 4 months and ran it down again. She wrote a number on the corner of a piece of pattern paper. She wrote the new rent under it. She drew a line. She looked at what was left for a while. Then she tore the corner off the pattern paper, folded it in half, and put it in the drawer where she kept things she wasn't finished with. Delilah knocked on the frame at 12:30 with a garment bag over her arm and the black body camera already clipped at her left shoulder seam for the afternoon run. Kensington delivery, I'm gone till 3. Take Ruiz with you. Taking Ruiz. Delilah didn't move. You eat? I'll eat. That's not what I asked. Marissa looked up. I've got a call at 1 with the leasing agent, she said. If it goes the way I think it goes, I'm going to need you here at 4. Why 4? Because at 4, I'm going to do something you're going to want to argue with me about, and I'd rather you got it out of your system before the floor closes. Delilah's mouth opened, then it shut. She adjusted the garment bag on her arm. 4, she said, and went. The call took 9 minutes. The leasing agent was polite. He was polite the way a man is polite when he has been told to be, and he used the word, unfortunately, 4 times, and he said the holding company was not authorized to negotiate on ground floor commercial, and he said the schedule was the schedule. Marissa asked who owned the holding company. He said he wasn't in a position to comment on ownership structure. She asked whether the holding company had, at any point, been in contact with a firm representing a purchase offer on her business. There was a pause on the line. It was not a long pause. It was long enough. Ms. Pierce, I'm just the agent on the building. I know, she said. That's why I asked you and not them. I understand, she said. One more. Is the building still taking commercial applications for the unit across the street? The bookbinders. That unit's been withdrawn from the market. Since when? I'd have to check. December, she said. Don't check. She hung up first. She sat in the office and did not move for a full minute. Then she stood and went out onto the floor and crossed to where Catherine was steaming a sleeve. Cat, I need the good cardstock and the black pen, not the fine one, the other one. Catherine set the steamer down slowly. What are we writing? A price. The floor went quiet, in that way a room goes quiet, when 4 people all stop at once, and none of them wants to be the one who spoke. Catherine got the cardstock. Marissa took it to the cutting table, and sat, and did not write anything for a while. Eternité was 10 feet away, on the form, under the good lights, and it had never been under the good lights with the front door unlocked. She wrote the name first. That part was easy. Under the name she wrote the year she'd started it. Under that she wrote the count, 1,900, because if someone was going to own it, they were going to know what they were owning. Then she stopped at the last line. She thought about the number in the drawer. She thought about payroll and Catherine's 9 years, and the silk already cut for spring, and the schedule of payment dates that started on the 1st. She wrote a figure that would cover 14 months of the new rent. She looked at it. She crossed it out with one clean stroke, and wrote a figure that would cover 22. Delilah came through the door at 4 minutes past 4 with the empty garment bag folded over her arm, and she saw the card in Marissa's hand and the form standing in the middle of the floor, and she stopped dead. No. Yes. Marissa. 22 months, Marissa said. That's what the number buys me. 22 months to find another way, or 22 months to sell this place standing up instead of getting carried out of it. That is 10 years. I know exactly how long it is. You put your hands on that dress every day for a decade, and in 5 weeks I put 6 people out of work. Marissa's voice didn't rise. That was the thing Delilah always said about her afterward, to anyone who asked. It didn't rise. Kat's got a kid in her 2nd year. Ruiz sends money home on the 15th. You've got a mortgage you took because I told you this place was solid. Delilah's jaw worked. That's not fair. It's true, though. Both things can be true. Marissa almost smiled at that. Then let me buy time another way, Delilah said. Let me call the Halloran people. Let me put 4 girls on ready-to-wear for a season. Let me do anything except stand here while you sell the only thing in this building that isn't for sale. Everything in this building is for sale. That's what a shop is. Not that. Especially that. Marissa lifted the card so Delilah could see the figure. Look at it. Look at what it's worth. That's not a dress, Delilah. That's a wall. That's the only wall between 6 people and the 1st of the month. And I have been standing in front of it for 10 years, telling myself it wasn't. Delilah looked at the number for a long moment. And if nobody comes? Then it hangs there and I've lost nothing but the sheet. And if somebody does? Marissa put the card down. Then I hand it over, she said, and I smile, and I say thank you, and I go in the back, and I don't come out for a while. She walked the card over to the form. The floor watched her do it. She set the card on the small brass stand at the base, the one they used for the archive pieces, and she squared it with 2 fingers so it sat straight. Then she stood there and read her own handwriting. The name, the year, the count, the figure. Behind her, Catherine had both hands pressed flat on the cutting table. Marissa reached down and turned the card face down. Marissa, Delilah said. It's on the floor, Marissa said. It's for sale. That's the decision, and it's made. She stepped back and looked at the blank white rectangle sitting where a price should be. But nobody walks in here and sees a number before they see the dress. She turned and went into the office and shut the door, and the floor stayed quiet for a good 10 seconds before the steamer started up again. At 6 they closed. Catherine left last, and she stopped at the form on the way out, and she reached toward the card and then didn't touch it. Marissa locked the door behind her and stood in the dark shop with the alarm panel beeping its 30-second warning. She hadn't turned the lamp off. It was still on over the form, the way she'd left it at 4:20 that morning, and the beads along the left hip caught the light and threw it, and the whole skirt looked, for a second, like something that had decided to move on its own. She keyed the alarm. She went home. She slept 4 hours, which was 2 more than usual. At 9:40 the next morning, a white town car stopped outside 214 Adler Street and did not pull to the curb. The driver came around and opened the rear door before the engine had finished turning over, and the woman who stepped out onto Adler Street looked at the shop number instead of the window. Catherine saw her first. She was at the front counter with the receipt book open, and she straightened the way a person straightens when the room changes temperature. "Delilah," she said. Delilah was already moving. She crossed the floor, checked the fall of the front curtain, and squared the brass stand at the mannequin's feet by half an inch. 10 years of habit. Nothing on the floor was allowed to sit crooked when money walked in. Marissa heard the bell from the back atelier. She had a sleeve pinned to the board and her mouth full of pins, and she took 2 of them out and set them in the cushion on her wrist and listened. Heels, 2 sets, one heavy, one light. "Good morning," Catherine said out front. "Welcome to Pierce." The woman did not answer the greeting. She walked. Marissa could track her by the sound, past the rack of spring samples, past the ivory column gown that stopped every buyer who came through that door, past the beaded jacket Vincent Marchetti had photographed for the March issue. 9 steps. Then nothing. "That one," C.O. Yerin said. Delilah came around the counter. "The atelier piece. I know what it is." Yerin's gaze stayed on the skirt. "How long has it been on the floor?" "Since yesterday evening." Yesterday. Something moved at the corner of her mouth and went away. Convenient. Catherine reached for the brass stand. "The card is face down. Would you like—" "No." Catherine's hand stopped. "Not yet." Yerin took one step closer to the mannequin and stopped exactly where a fitter stands, not where a customer stands. Turned the shoulder toward the window. Delilah rotated the form. The blue at the left hip caught the light and let it go. Slow, the way it was built to. Yerin watched it the whole way around. Then she pulled a phone from the quilted bag, photographed the hip, and lowered the phone without checking the image. "Is the owner in the building?" The question landed in the middle of the floor and sat there. Delilah answered it the way she answered everything. "Can I help you with something the owner would be needed for?" "That isn't what I asked." "We're happy to take your details." Yerin turned her head. She looked at Delilah for the first time. A short pass from the head wrap to the smock, to the small black square clipped at the shoulder seam, and then went back to the gown, as if the answer had been given, and filed. In the back atelier, Marissa put the second pin into the cushion and stood with her hand flat on the pressing board. She had a rule about the floor. 11 years old, made the first month she opened, learned in a Madison Avenue showroom where a woman had handed Marissa her coat and asked when the designer would be down. The rule was simple. When a client is buying, the client meets the work first. The name on the door came after. Half the sales in this shop had been closed before anyone learned who Pierce was. She had never once resented the rule. She stayed in the back. Out front, Catherine had recovered enough to do her job. "The piece is called Eternité," she said. "It was constructed here. Every bead is hand-set." "How many?" 1900. "Counted or estimated?" "Counted." Yerin's eyes went along the bodice and down. "By whom?" "By the woman who set them." Delilah stepped in before Catherine could give more. "Are you shopping for a specific date?" "March 14th. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Yerin said, in the flat voice people use for a word they've said too many times to hear anymore. She lifted a gloved hand and let the fingertips hover an inch from the skirt without touching it. The pear-cut stone sat over the leather like something bolted on. 6 weeks. Is that a problem? "It isn't a made-to-order piece," Delilah said. "It's finished. The alterations would be the only work." "Then it isn't a problem." "There's a fitting process. 2 sessions minimum, usually 3. 1. Delilah kept her face where it was. 1 session for a corset bodice with a hand-beaded overlay. 1 session at my address, tomorrow morning. Yerin turned from the mannequin and finally looked at the shop the way clients look at a shop. Quickly, once, at the ceiling and the floor, and the fire door. 9 o'clock. Everything is set up there. I don't stand in rooms like this. Catherine's pale green eyes came up over the half-moon glasses. She said nothing. Her thumb pressed the thimble on its cord until the cord went taut. "We can arrange a house call," Delilah said. "There's a fee. Add it. And the alterations are done here. The piece doesn't get worked on anywhere but this building. Then bring what you need." Yerin walked back toward the counter. Her heels hit the boards in a rhythm that never changed speed. "Turn the card over." Delilah crossed and turned it. Yerin read it. She read it a second time, and the second read was slower, and at the end of it, she did something Catherine would describe 3 days later to a lawyer. She smiled. "Ha ha ha, that's high," Yeren said. "It is. For a shop on this street. For that dress," Delilah said. "Yes." Yeren set the phone on the counter, face up, and slid it a few inches forward. "It's not high enough. It's the only one, isn't it? There isn't a second." "There's no second. No pattern in a drawer somewhere. No sample. No." "Good." She picked the phone back up. "Reservation in full. Today. Not a deposit." Catherine's hand went to the receipt book and stopped halfway. "Full payment before fitting isn't." "It's a wire," Yeren said. "Give me the account." Delilah did not move for 3 full seconds. Behind her, at the seam of the curtain, a shadow shifted and held still. "I'll get the banking details," Delilah said. She went back through the curtain. Marissa was standing right there, 3 feet inside the passage, arms folded, tape over her shoulder. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "Full amount," Delilah said, low. "Wire. Today." "I heard." She asked twice if the owner was here. "I heard that too." "Marissa." Delilah's voice dropped further. She walked past the column gown. She walked past everything. She didn't browse. She came in and went to it. People do that when a dress is good. People stop at 3 others first. Delilah shook her head once. She had her hand up before she got there. Marissa looked past her, through the gap in the curtain, at the sliver of ivory coat standing at her counter. She thought about the man in the windbreaker photographing the loading gate. She thought about a bindery across the street that had been pulled off the market in December, and a broker who had gone quiet on the telephone for 2 seconds too long. "Get the banking details," she said. "That's it?" "She's buying a dress, Delilah. Let her buy the dress." Delilah opened the file drawer and took out the bank sheet. "You're not coming out." "No?" "She's going to ask a 3rd time. Then tell her the truth. The owner's in the building." Marissa took the tape off her shoulder and wound it around her hand, "and that she'll meet whoever brings the gown." Delilah went back through the curtain. "Measurements," Yeren said, before Delilah had the sheet out of the drawer. Catherine reached for the tape on the hook. "I'll need you to stand." "I have them." Yeren recited 7 numbers from memory, in order, without a pause between any of them, and then repeated the waist. "Write it twice. People get that one wrong." Catherine wrote it twice. "The bodice is boned." 12 stays. Then it comes in at the side seams, not the back. Yeren's chin lifted a fraction toward the mannequin. "The beading crosses the back panel. Cut there, and you cut the pattern in half." Catherine's pen paused over the sheet. It was the correct note. It was the note a fitter makes on the 3rd visit, not a bride on the 1st. "You've had gowns altered before," Catherine said. "I've had gowns ruined before." Delilah put the bank sheet on the counter and turned it around. "Accounts here, routing under it." Yeren photographed it. "Who does the alteration?" "Our workroom." "That isn't a name. It's whoever the workroom assigns," Delilah said. "Then I'd like the name tomorrow." Yeren tipped the phone screen away from the window glare. "At 9. In front of everyone. I want to hear who is putting scissors into this." Catherine set the pen down. "May I say something?" "You may." "That skirt has 4 layers under the beadwork," Catherine said. "If it goes an inch too far in, the drape dies and it never comes back. There's no letting it out. There's no second attempt." Yeren considered her, the smock, the glasses pushed up, the needle parked in the lapel, with the mild interest of someone reading a label. "You've worked here a long time," she said. 9 years. Then you'll want to be in the room." Catherine's throat moved. "I'll be in the room." "Good." Yeren tapped the send key with one gloved knuckle. "Everyone should see it." The wire took 11 minutes. Yeren stood the entire time and refused the chair Catherine pulled out for her, And when the confirmation came through, she read it off her screen and turned the screen around so Catherine could copy the reference number into the book. "Write the address," Yaren said. Catherine turned the receipt book. "Go ahead." Yaren gave it. A hillside address, north, above the reservoir. No street number the way ordinary streets have street numbers. A gate name and a private drive. Catherine wrote it. Halfway through, her pen slowed. She knew the drive. Anyone who read a newspaper in this city knew the drive. The house at the top of it belonged to a man whose name got printed in 3 different sections: business, society, and the one nobody wanted to be printed in. "The vehicle will be stopped at the gate," Yaren said. "They'll want names. Give the full names of everyone in the car, in advance, tonight. No one gets added in the morning." Catherine's pen came off the paper. "Everyone, everyone, everyone." "May I ask whose residence?" "You may write it down," Yaren said. She reached over, took the pen out of Catherine's hand, and printed one name under the address herself. Then she put the pen on the counter and pushed the book back. Catherine looked at what was written there. Kang Tae-jun. Delilah read it upside down. Something went out of the room. 9 o'clock, Yaren said. Not 9:15. We'll be there at 9. The gown goes in a car, not a van, nothing with a company name on the side. Yaren was already fastening the bag. 2 people, no more. 4, Delilah said. Yaren stopped. It's 11 feet of skirt with 1,900 beads on it, and it doesn't fold, Delilah said. 1 person carries the shoulders, 1 carries the hem, 1 carries the case, 1 drives. 4 people or the dress doesn't leave this building. For the first time all morning, Seo Yaren looked directly at her and stayed looking. 4, she said. Thank you. Do they speak? Catherine's head came up. Excuse me? At the house, Yaren drew the glove tighter on the right hand, finger by finger, working the leather down over the knuckles. There will be people in the room. My father, others. They're there for the wedding, not for a delivery. Your people bring the dress in, they put it on the form, and they don't perform for the room. Our people work, Delilah said. That's what they do. Then, we understand each other. Yaren turned toward the door and then stopped, one hand on the brass push plate, and looked back at the mannequin standing under the good lights with its card face up now, price showing, the blue at the hip going quiet as the sun moved off the window. 10 years, she said. Nobody had told her that. Catherine's mouth opened. Delilah put 2 fingers on the counter, an inch of movement, nothing anyone across the room would catch, and Catherine's mouth closed. It's in the file, Yaren said pleasantly, as though the sentence had a bottom. It's in every magazine you've ever been in. 9 o'clock. The bell rang. The town car pulled off without ever having touched the curb. Delilah stood at the window until it turned at the light. What file? Catherine said. I don't know. She said file. I know what she said. Marissa came through the curtain then, and the 2 of them turned. She went straight to the counter and turned the receipt book toward her and read the address and the name under it, and her face gave the room nothing. She read the wire reference. She read the amount. That's the lease, Catherine said. Her voice had gone thin. That's the lease, and the increase, and the whole year. It's 22 months, Marissa said. It's paid? Marissa, it cleared. It's in the account. I watched it. I know. Then say something. Marissa put her hand flat on the open page, over the name Yaren had printed herself. Ruiz drives, she said. Delilah, you and I carry. Catherine brings the kit, the full kit, not the road box, hems, the good shears, the spare spool, the steamer head, everything. If they've got a form up there, it'll be the wrong height. So bring our own stand in the trunk. That's 4, Delilah said. That's 4. She asked for 2. She asked for 2. and she got 4, and she agreed to 4. Marissa closed the book. Names go to the gate tonight. Full legal names. Catherine, do it before 6, and copy me on it. Catherine wrote it on her palm because her hands wanted something to do. Marissa, that house. I know whose house it is. Do you know what he? I know what the papers print. Marissa went to the mannequin and crouched at the hem. She lifted the last 8 inches into the light and turned it, looking at the underside, at 41 stitches closed at 4:20 in the morning, by a woman who had not slept since. He's not buying it, she is. Delilah came and stood over her. You're going yourself. Yes. You've had 4 hours sleep and you haven't eaten since. I'm going myself. Why? Marissa let the hem down. She smoothed it flat with the back of her hand, the way you settle something you're not going to be able to do again. Because she asked twice who owns this place, Marissa said, and both times she asked it like she already knew the answer. Delilah's hand went to her shoulder, to the small black square at the seam, checking the clip the way she checked it 40 times a day without knowing she was doing it. Charge it tonight, Marissa said. It's always charged. Charge it anyway. At 6 o'clock, Catherine sent 4 names to a private security desk that answered on the second ring and read every one of them back to her. At 7, Delilah moved her car so the good one would be at the curb in the morning. At 8:10, Marissa steamed the shoulder seam and hung the gown in the long case herself, and she took the 4 remaining beads from the old spool, the ones she had bought at 22, and put them in a glassine envelope in the fitting kit, in case something went wrong up there and she had to set one by hand in a stranger's house. She closed the case. She locked it. She left the mannequin light on all night, standing empty in the middle of the floor. Ruiz took the hill road in 2nd gear because Marissa asked him to. Every seam in the asphalt traveled up through the floor of the car and into the long case laid flat across the folded back seat, and she kept one hand on the lid the whole way up, the way a person holds a shoulder in a hospital corridor. 8:51, Catherine said from the front. Then we sit at the gate until 9. Delilah checked the clip at her left shoulder seam with her thumb, the way she checked a hem. Battery's full, I know. The gate had no keypad and no bell. A man in a gray coat came out of a booth built into the stonework, took the 4 names off a tablet and read them back, all 4, slowly, the way the security desk had read them the night before. He looked at Ruiz's license. He looked at the trunk. He did not open the case, and Marissa watched him decide not to. 9 o'clock, he said. House will meet you at the courtyard. The drive climbed another 2 minutes through black pines. Then the trees quit all at once, and the house was there, low, wide, glass and dark stone, built along the ridge instead of on top of it. Marissa counted 11 cars in the courtyard. She had been told there would be family present. 11 cars was not family. Delilah, I see them. Shoulders and hem, nothing else. If somebody speaks to you, you send them to me. 2 housemen came for the case, and Marissa put her palm flat on it. It rides with us. They let it ride with them. Inside, the ceiling went up 2 stories over a room with a long, pale floor, and at the far end, there was a fireplace the size of a doorway, with a real fire in it, small and neat, the kind lit for the look of it. Marissa registered the fire, the distance from the fire to the fitting platform, and the folded stack of linen sheets on the console beside it. Then she stopped registering and started working. They had 11 minutes to set. Catherine unrolled the kit on the console farthest from the hearth. Delilah screwed the stand together and set it where the north light fell without hitting the beadwork straight on. Marissa opened the case, took the gown out by the shoulders, and let the skirt down onto the stand in one long controlled release, 4 layers finding each other in the air. The room noticed. She heard it, the shift of a dozen people turning at once, a low sound that was not applause and was not talk. then heels unhurried from the mezzanine stairs. Yaren came down in bone cashmere with the coat still on and stopped 4 feet from the gown. She looked at the hip panel first. She looked at the 4 people standing behind it second. I asked for 2. You agreed to 4, Delilah said. I agreed to 4 staff. Yaren's eyes moved along the line. Ruiz, Catherine, Delilah, and landed on Marissa and stayed. Which one of you is doing the alteration? That was the one thing I asked for by name. You'll have the name, Marissa said. Then say it. After the fitting, you measure a dress on a body, not on a stand. There was a pause with weight in it. An older man had come to the rail of the mezzanine and stood there with both hands on a cane, silver hair combed back, glasses catching the window. He said nothing. He simply arrived and stayed, and the room arranged itself slightly around the fact of him. Yaren gave her coat to a houseman. Fine, behind the screen. It took 22 minutes. Marissa worked the way she worked at Adler Street. Quiet, fast, hands where they needed to be, a half second before the fabric got there. The waist ran true to the 7 measurements Yaren had recited from memory. The bust needed 3/8 taken from the left side seam. The hem was long by 1 1/4 inches in the back, because Yaren had chosen a higher heel than she'd named. Stand, Marissa said, and Yaren stood, and Marissa knelt and set the first pin. Through the screen, the room had gone louder. People had drifted in from other doors. Someone laughed at something that had nothing to do with any of them. Do you know whose house this is? Yaren said, down at the crown of Marissa's head. Kang Tae-jun, 2nd pin. You wrote it in our book yourself, and you still sent your girls up here first. I didn't send anyone. I came. Yaren's chin lifted a 1/2 inch. Marissa felt it through the fabric before she saw it. They came out from behind the screen, and Yaren walked to the platform in the middle of the floor and stepped up onto it without being asked, and that was when Marissa understood the shape of the morning. The platform faced the room. The room had 30 people in it now. Everyone should see it, Yaren had said in the shop. She had not been talking about the dress. Turn, Yaren said. Marissa took the hem out around her, 1/4 turn, then another, keeping the 4 layers from catching on the platform edge. It sits wrong at the hip. It sits where it was pinned 4 minutes ago. It sits wrong. Yaren lifted her right hand and let the pear cut catch the window and pointed down at the blue panel, the one that had taken 2 months to find. This color reads cheap under this light. A woman near the windows said something in Korean, low, to another woman. Both of them looked at Marissa's face and not at the dress. Catherine took 1/2 a step forward, and Marissa stopped her with 2 fingers. The panel is hand-set, Marissa said. 140 beads. If the light in this room is the problem, we can bring the dress back to the shop and photograph it. Under the light, you'll actually be married in. Are you telling me what my light is? I'm telling you what the beads do. Yaren turned to the room. That was the move. She turned her whole body away from Marissa and addressed the 40 feet of open floor, and her voice went up 10%, which was all it needed to go. 10 years, she said. That's what the card said. 10 years for a hem that hangs 1.25 inches long. The hem hangs long because you changed your heel. And the seam here, a gloved finger tapped the left side seam, hard enough to move the fabric. Puckered. That's a pin. It's puckered. It's a pin, and it's mine, and I'll take it out in front of you. Marissa stepped up onto the platform, which she had not been invited to do, and the room went quiet, the way a room does when someone breaks a rule everyone had agreed on without saying it. She drew the pin. She smoothed the seam flat with her thumb. She held the pin up between 2 fingers, so the whole floor could see 1 inch of steel. Somebody near the stairs made a small sound of amusement, and it was not aimed at her. Yaren's jaw set. She stepped off the platform, crossed to the console where Catherine had laid out the kit, and put one gloved hand on the leather roll. "Then it won't be you," she said. Marissa stayed where she was. "Say that again." "The alterations." Yaren looked past her, at Catherine, and her face rearranged itself into something almost warm. "You, the one with the glasses. You've been sewing longer than she's been alive, haven't you?" 9 years at Pierce, Catherine said. Before that, 21 years total. 21 years. Yaren let it hang. "You'll do the work. I'll pay you directly. She can stand where she likes, but the needle in my dress will not be hers." Nobody moved. Ruiz had his hands at his sides, and his eyes on the floor, and his weight on the balls of his feet. Catherine took her glasses off her head and folded them against her chest. "No," she said. Yaren's hand was still on the kit. "I'm offering you 3 times what she pays you. You're offering to buy the one thing in that dress that isn't for sale." Catherine's voice came out thin and steady, and it carried. Every bead in that bodice came off a spool she bought when she was 22. 4 of them are left. She brought them up here in an envelope, in case one came loose in a stranger's house. She put her glasses back on. "I don't touch her seams." Nobody touches her seams. Marissa did not look at Catherine, because if she had looked at Catherine, she would have lost something in front of 30 people. The old man on the mezzanine shifted his cane, and the brass handle clicked once on the rail. "Then we have a problem," Yaren said. "No," Marissa said. "We have a decision." She came down off the platform. She crossed to the console and closed the leather roll and tied it, and the small sound of the tie was the loudest thing in the room. "Your contract is for 1 gown, altered by Pierce Atelier, at Pierce Atelier, by the hand of the maker. That's what you paid for. That's what the receipt in our book says, and you stood in my shop and watched the reference number get copied into it. I paid in full." "You did, and I'm voiding it." Marissa said it flat, the way she'd say a measurement. "The transfer goes back to your account today, every dollar. The dress leaves with me." The sound that went through the room was not a sound she could name. "You don't get to void anything," Yaren said. "You're a vendor. I'm the owner." For the first time all morning, Yaren's face did something she hadn't chosen. "You asked twice in my shop whether the owner was in the building," Marissa said. "Twice. My people didn't answer you, because I told them not to. You've been talking down the front of a dress for 20 minutes to the woman who built it." She let the pause sit. "You're looking at her." Somewhere behind the crowd, a door opened and closed. Yaren recovered fast. Marissa gave her that. The chin came down, the mouth flattened, and the appraisal came back into her eyes like a light being switched on in a room that had been dark for a second too long. "You let me stand there," she said. "You never asked me anything. You asked them. You let me stand there and be measured by a shopgirl who was the owner." Yaren's voice dropped, and dropping was worse. "In this house, with his family on that landing. I let you have a fitting. You wanted an audience instead. Do you understand what you're doing? I'm taking my dress home. Do you understand what this house is? I understand what my shop is." Yaren looked up at the mezzanine, at the old man with the cane, and something passed between them that Marissa could not read and did not need to. When Yaren turned back, her hands had gone very still. "Take it off the stand then," she said, "since it's yours. Delilah, case." Delilah moved. Marissa stepped up to the gown, put both hands at the shoulders the way she had for 10 years, and began to lift the weight of it off the stand. And behind her, unhurried, Yaren walked toward the hearth. Catherine saw it first. Marissa knew because Catherine's breath changed. Yaren took a linen sheet off the folded stack on the console beside the fireplace. She shook it open with one snap of her wrist, the way you'd shake out a tablecloth, and she held one corner of it into the fire, and the flame went up the fabric fast and pale, and almost invisible in the daylight coming off the ridge. Nobody in that room of 30 people moved for a full second. "You're right," Yaren said. "It isn't mine," and she threw it. The sheet came across 8 feet of pale floor, opening in the air, and Marissa turned into it, with the gown's shoulders still in both hands. The linen came down over the skirt, 4 layers of silk, 10 years, 1,900 beads, and the sound it made was nothing at all. Then the sound came. Marissa went down onto the burning cloth with her forearms and her whole body, and she felt the heat go through the sleeve of her dress and up the inside of her wrist, and she kept both hands moving, pressing, killing it in patches, and she was shouting for the case, and for water, and she did not hear her own voice at all. Catherine hit the floor beside her with the leather roll and beat the hem. Delilah pulled the whole stand over backward to get the upper half of the gown away from the burning half, and the stand went down with a crack, and Ruiz was tearing his jacket off his shoulders on the way across the room. Somebody screamed by the windows. Somebody else laughed, once, in shock. And then there were hands. A man came past Ruiz without slowing and dropped to one knee in the burning linen and took the sheet in his bare hands and gathered it into itself, smothering it against the floor, folding the fire into a shrinking bundle of scorched cloth. He did it with a kind of economy that had nothing to do with rescue. He had done something like it before. His sleeve was pushed back. There was a plain silver band on his right thumb. The collar of his shirt was open, and the black ink came up out of it along the side of his neck and ended just under his jaw. The last of the flame went out under his palms. For 3 seconds, the only sound in that house was Catherine breathing. The man stood. He looked at his hands. He looked at the floor, at the black crescent burned through 4 layers of skirt, at the beads that had gone dull and gray where the heat had crossed them, at one small dark bead, sitting loose on the pale stone 6 inches from Marissa's knee. Then he looked at Marissa. Her forearm was already blistering. She hadn't noticed. She was holding the top half of the gown against her chest, with both arms, the way you hold something that can't be set down yet. "Get water on that arm," he said. No. He waited. Marissa got to her feet. Her hands were shaking and her voice was not. "You can pay for fabric," she said. "You can't buy the 10 years you just burned." Behind her, Yaren was still standing by the hearth with her right hand at her collarbone, the diamond on the outside of the glove, and 30 people had turned to look at her instead of at the floor. Kang Taejun did not raise his voice. He turned his head maybe 15 degrees. "Yarena, it was an accident. You lit it. She humiliated me in your house. She's holding a dress," he said. "You're holding nothing." He crossed the floor. He stopped at the edge of the burned patch and stood there a moment, and the old man on the mezzanine started down the stairs, with the cane going hard on each tread, and 40 people waited to see which of the 3 of them would speak first. "Everyone out," Taejun said. Nobody moved. Out. They moved. He waited until the room had emptied to 8, then 6, then the old man at the bottom of the stairs, and his daughter by the fire, and 4 people from a dress shop on Adler Street, standing in a ring of scorched linen. Do-yoon had appeared from somewhere near the door with a folio under his arm and his sleeves already rolled, and he was writing. Taejun looked at Yaren for a long moment. Whatever he had been for the last 11 months, he put down. "The one leaving," he said, "is you." Do-yoon had the 2 families in the dining room by 9 that night, because Taejun told him to make the calls before anyone could rehearse. Marissa was already down the hill by then. She heard about it the way the rest of the city did. At 11:40, in a single paragraph, a wire service ran without a byline. The Kang and So engagement, announced in November, was dissolved. No reason given. Kang Taejun had said 11 words at the head of his own table, with So Kwang-min 4 seats away and the wedding planner still holding a fabric board, and one of the 11 was fire. Kwang-min did not argue at the table. He asked for his coat. He made his first call from the car. At 6:15 the next morning, Catherine let herself into the atelier and found Marissa already at the cutting table, with the burned half of Eternité spread flat under the north lamps, forearm wrapped in gauze she had done herself. The scorch crescent ran through 4 layers. Under it, in the ruined bead field, the beads had gone the gray of old teeth. "You slept here," Catherine said. "I slept." Catherine put her glasses down on the marble. The refund cleared at 4:02. Delilah pushed it through from her phone. "Good. That was 22 months, Marissa." It was 22 months of hers. Marissa lifted the skirt panel an inch and let it fall. "Get me the loop." The first press piece landed at 7:50. It was not in a fashion outlet. It ran in a business daily, under a lifestyle column that had never once written about dressmaking, and it was 900 words long, which meant somebody had started writing it before the sun came up. It said a bridal fitting at a private residence had been interrupted by a fire. It said a garment had been destroyed. It said a vendor had brought unvetted staff and unapproved equipment into the home, that an open flame had been used near the hem to remove a wrinkle, and that the couple's engagement had ended amid the fallout. The vendor was named. The vendor was Pierce Atelier. Seo Yerin was not named. She appeared once, in the 8th paragraph, as the bride who declined to comment. Delilah read it standing up in the middle of the floor, and then read it again out loud, the second time slower, because the first time she had not believed the sentence about the open flame. "They put the match in our hand," she said. "They put it in Catherine's hand." Marissa pointed at the screen. "Read it again." An employee attempted a hem correction. "That's Catherine. That's the one they can burn cheapest." Catherine sat down on the fitting stool. She had a threaded needle in her lapel, and she took it out and pushed it back in and took it out again. "Nobody used steam near that hem," she said. "I have my own kit. My own kit has never had an open flame in it in 21 years. I know. They can't just. They already did." Marissa closed the laptop. "Call Mrs. Ellingham before 10. She'll have seen it by 9. Mrs. Ellingham had seen it by 8:40. She was polite for 4 minutes, and then she asked whether the atelier carried liability coverage for work performed off-premises, and Marissa understood that the question had been given to her by somebody else, in those words, that morning. By noon there were 6 cancellations, 2 of them March brides, one of them a woman whose mother had bought her wedding gown at Pierce 11 years ago, in the first month, when the sign was still hand-painted. At 1:20, the fabric house in Como held a standing order for silk veil that had been shipping to 214 Adler Street since the 2nd year. The credit terms had been 30 days for a decade. The email said the account had been moved to prepayment, pending review of press coverage. It was signed by a man who had once sent Marissa a birthday card. At 2 o'clock, the shoe brand that had underwritten her spring presentation pulled its logo off the invitation without calling. At 2:12, the fitting room phone rang, and a woman's voice asked whether it was true that Pierce Atelier had been dropped by its insurer. Delilah asked who was calling. The line clicked off. Marissa wrote the time on the pad by the register, and under it the words the woman had used, because they were not words a bride would think of on her own. At 2:35, Ruiz came up from the loading door and said there was a man across the street with a camera, and Marissa went and looked, and it was not the windbreaker from Tuesday. It was a different jacket and the same posture, and this one photographed the door every time it opened. Delilah went out with a garment bag she did not need to deliver, walked past him, came back 12 minutes later and said, "He's shooting the staff, not the building. Then stop going out the front." The rent letter's deadline sat on the wall calendar in Marissa's hand, circled once, and she had just wired back the only money that covered it. At 4:10, a black sedan stopped at the curb, and this one touched the curb. Han Do-yoon got out with the leather folio under his arm and his sleeves already rolled, and he stopped on the sidewalk a full second to read the hand-painted numerals over the door before he came in. He came in alone. He asked for Marissa by her full name and pronounced it correctly. "You have 30 seconds, Delilah said. "I'd like 10 minutes. He looked past her. "I'll take 30 seconds. Marissa came out from behind the cutting table, with the gauze showing at her cuff. She did not sit, and she did not offer a chair, and the room around them had 4 people in it pretending to sew. Do-yoon opened the folio and set a check on the counter, face up, turned toward her. She read it without touching it. The figure covered the reserve she had just refunded. It covered the materials line for 10 years, itemized on a second sheet beneath it. Silk, beading, the freight on the Como Faya, at replacement cost, not at cost. It covered the rent increase for 2 years. There was a third sheet, and the third sheet was a letter of intent from Kang Holdings to underwrite her spring presentation in full. He calculated it himself, Do-yoon said. Twice. He threw out the first number for being insulting. And the second one? "The second one," he told me, "is also insulting. He sent it anyway." Marissa put one finger on the corner of the check and slid it 2 inches back toward him. No. Do-yoon's expression did not change, but he wrote something in the folio, which was worse. "May I tell him a reason?" "You may tell him the reason." She kept her finger on the paper. "If he pays, she never does." He stopped writing. "Read what ran this morning," Marissa said. "It says an employee of mine put an open flame on a hem. 900 words. Not one of them is her name. She's already spending money to keep her name off this, press people. A column that's never covered a stitch in its life. If your boss covers the loss, then there is no loss. If there is no loss, there was no fire. If there was no fire, then the only thing that happened at that house was that my staff was careless. He knows that. Then he knows why I'm handing it back. He'll ask what you want instead. I want her to write the check." Marissa took her finger off the paper. "In a courtroom, with her name printed on it, where the same people who read that column can read that too." Do-yoon closed the folio. He looked for a moment like a man who had been up since 4, which he had. "Miss Pierce, there's a version of this where you take that and you're solvent by Friday." "I've read that version." "I thought you might." He got as far as the door, then stopped with his hand on it and did not turn around all the way. "You'll want to be careful about the building," he said. "The building?" "Your lease, your landlord." He tapped the folio once against his leg. "That's all I'm able to say today." Then he was in the sedan, and the sedan was gone, and Marissa stood in the middle of her own floor, with the check still sitting on the counter, where he had left it, because he had left it. She picked it up, took it to the back, and put it in the drawer of unfinished things, on top of the torn corner of ledger paper. "You just filed a man's apology in a junk drawer," Delilah said from the doorway. "It's not a junk drawer." Adrian Whitlock arrived at 9 o'clock the next morning in a forest green suit, with an oxblood briefcase and no assistant, and she took 11 minutes to look at the burned skirt before she said a single word about the law. She looked at the crescent, she looked at the 4 layers under it. She put on her reading glasses and bent over the gray bead field and stayed there long enough that Catherine looked away. "How many of these did you set by hand?" 1900. Over. 10 years. Any of them machine set? None. Adrian straightened up. "Then this isn't a dress." She snapped the briefcase open on the marble. "Legally, this is a unique work of authorship in a physical medium, destroyed by a party who had a signed contract with you and no ownership interest at the time of destruction. That's not property damage, Miss Pierce. That's a different statute and a different number at the end of it. They're saying my employee started it. They're saying that because they haven't been sued yet. Adrian laid out 3 folders. People say a great many things before there's a docket number. Do you have the contract? Signed. Full reserve paid. Voided by me on site. Refunded within the day. Refunded. Adrian's eyebrow went up half an inch. That was expensive. It was clean. It's the best thing you've done this week. She uncapped a pen. You voided before the fire. That kills their breach argument in 1 line. She wrote for a moment. Witnesses? 30 people. Who's 30 people? Marissa said nothing. Right. Adrian set the pen down. 30 people who eat at that man's table. So we file, and we lose the room, and their lawyers spend 14 months finding out that nobody saw anything. She looked up. Unless you have something that doesn't have to be subpoenaed to tell the truth. The floor went quiet. Catherine's hand stopped on the marble. Delilah, at the far end of the room, put down the pattern weight she was holding and touched the left seam of her smock, where a small matte black square had been clipped on every delivery for 3 years, because Marissa had made it policy, after a client in the 2nd year claimed a hem had come back short. Marissa, she said, it was on. Nobody moved. It's on for every delivery. You told me to charge it. Twice. Marissa turned all the way around. Where is it? In my bag. It's been in my bag since Wednesday. Adrian closed the briefcase very slowly, the way people close things when they don't want to make a sound. Miss Frost, she said, how long does it record? 4 hours. And how far were you from the fireplace? Delilah thought about it. 9 feet, maybe 8. Adrian sat down. They watched it in the back atelier at 10:40 with the door shut, on Catherine's laptop, with the volume at 3. 90 seconds of it mattered. The camera sat at Delilah's left shoulder, which meant it was pointed exactly where Delilah had been looking, which was at the platform. It showed the hand reaching for the linen on the console. It showed the linen going into the decorative fire and coming out lit. It showed the arm and the throw and the ivory sleeve and the pear-cut ring over the black glove, and it showed Marissa going down onto the burning cloth with her forearms. The audio was clean enough for 8 words. You're right, it isn't mine. Catherine got up and left the room. Through the wall they heard the tap running in the little sink, and then they heard it keep running after she had finished with it. Play the last 11 seconds again, Adrian said. After the throw. Delilah dragged it back. On the screen the frame swung as she lunged for the stand, and for one blurred instant the camera crossed the mezzanine, and a man with a cane stood at the rail with both hands on it, watching, and made no sound and no move at all. Who is that? Her father, Marissa said. Adrian wrote 3 words down. He watched his daughter light a garment on fire and stayed at the rail. She looked up over the glasses. That is not a man who was surprised. Adrian watched it 4 times without blinking, and the 4th time she paused it on the frame with the ring and sat back. Well, she said, there's her name. They filed at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Destruction of a unique handmade work, breach of contract, and, Adrian added it herself, in longhand, on the way to the courthouse, tortious interference, for the 6 brides who had cancelled in 9 hours, holding language nobody in a bridal shop uses without being handed it. Named defendant, C.O. Yarin. Not the family, not the holding company, not the fiancé who no longer was one. You're sure, Adrian said in the car. One name. One name. Their counsel will offer to settle in 72 hours with a confidentiality clause and a number that ends your rent problem. Then they'll be wasting a phone call. Adrian laughed once, low, and it was not a kind laugh, and it was not aimed at Marissa. The clip went out at 6 p.m., unlisted, 90 seconds, no music, no title card, no logo. Delilah uploaded it from the back office, and Marissa stood behind her chair and watched the progress bar and said nothing until it finished. Description, date, address, nothing else. Nothing else, Marissa said. It had 400 views at 6:20. At 7:15, a bridal forum had it. At 8 o'clock, someone had cut the frame with the ring and the glove and put it next to a red carpet photograph from November, side by side, same hand, same stone, and that was the version that moved. At 9:40, Vincent Marchetti called Marissa's cell, which he had never used. Is it yours? It's my floor manager's camera. Is it edited? It's 90 seconds out of 4 hours. Nothing inside it is cut. There was a pause with breathing in it. I have a printed feature on you, closing in 11 days, Marchetti said. 6 pages. I want to move it to the front of the book. Do it. I have to make a call first. To whom? He didn't answer that, and he hung up, and Marissa stood in the dark storefront holding the phone with the light of the empty mannequin behind her. At 11 p.m., the Business Daily quietly amended its story. The paragraph about the open flame came out. No correction was printed. The word, fire, stayed. At 11:20, Delilah's phone showed 1.4 million. At 11:50, Catherine called, and her voice was wrong, and she said her name had been pulled off 2 freelance jobs she had held for 6 years, one of them booked through the spring. At 12:10, Marissa's phone lit again. Not a number she had. A block of text, no greeting. Take the check. What's coming is not the press. She read it twice. She put the phone face down on the cutting table, the way she had put down the price card, and went back to the burned skirt with the loop. At 8:05 the next morning, a man in a windbreaker photographed the front door of 2114 Adler Street, and behind him, a second man in a hard hat measured the width of the loading gate with a tape and wrote the number down. The man in the hard hat had finished with the loading gate and moved to the door frame when Marissa came out with the tape measure still over her shoulder. Who hired you? He looked at the clipboard instead of at her. Property manager. Which one? The numbers on the work order. He turned the clipboard so she could see it. There was a phone number and a case reference, and no company name anywhere on the page. She wrote the number on the back of her hand with a fabric marker. He watched her do it and said nothing, and that was the first thing that morning that told her how far along this already was. The letter came at 11:40, by courier, signed for by Delilah because Marissa was under the lamp with a needle in the burned skirt. Delilah carried it to the cutting table and set it down face up so it could be read without being touched. Termination of tenancy. 30-day cure period waived under Clause 14. Material breach. Unauthorized commercial activity conducted off-premises under the tenant's business name, creating liability exposure for the property owner. Marissa read Clause 14 twice. She had signed that lease 11 years ago at a kitchen table with a lawyer who charged her $90 and told her the clause was standard. They're using the fitting, Delilah said. They're using the article about the fitting. The letterhead named the entity that had bought the building in March. Marissa carried it to the desk, opened the drawer of unfinished things, and laid it beside Taejun's check and the torn corner of the ledger. Then she called Adrian Whitlock and read the clause aloud over the phone, word for word, and Adrian asked her to spell the name of the holding company, and Marissa heard a pen stop moving on the other end. Say it again. Marissa said it again. Send me a photo of the letterhead. Don't send it to anyone else. At 1:15, Vincent Marchetti called, and he did not begin with hello. The 6 pages come out. Marissa set the phone on the table and put it on speaker so her hands could keep working. You said 11 days. I said I had a call to make. I made it. He breathed once. The feature is pulled from the print book. It runs online in the fall if it runs. Who did you call, Vincent? Advertising. A pause with something ugly in it. 2 of my pages in that issue belong to a group that shares a parent with a freight company. They didn't threaten me. Nobody threatens anybody at that level. They asked if the story was legally settled, and I said no, and they said, then it isn't ready. Catherine had stopped moving at the pressing board. Marissa looked at her, then at the phone. Printed in the fall, and it's an obituary. I know what it is. Another pause. Marissa, keep the burned one. Whatever you do with it, don't let anybody clean it. He hung up before she could ask what he meant, and she stood there with the needle between 2 fingers and the shape of it landing slow. The eviction crew arrived at 8:20 the next morning, which was the 7th day. They were not thugs. That was the part nobody who watched it later understood. They were 4 men in company polos with a marshal's paper and a hand truck, and their supervisor was polite in the way of a man who has done this 200 times and has a route to finish. He read the notice at the door. He asked her to confirm her name. He gave her 90 minutes. 11 years, Delilah said. 90 minutes, ma'am. Marissa turned around in the doorway and looked at the floor of her shop and did the arithmetic out loud, because arithmetic was the only thing left that would hold still. Delilah, the client book and the pattern archive first. Catherine, the beadwork, the glassine, the bobbin case. Ruiz, get the van from Kensington, not ours, theirs, and tell Hector I'll pay him Friday. The bolts? Bolts last. Bolts can stand in the street. Paper can't. They emptied 11 years in 90 minutes. The archive went out in bankers' boxes, stacked 4 high on the sidewalk. Every pattern she had drafted since she was 22. Brown paper folded and labeled in her own handwriting. The silk rolls came out on their ends and leaned against the storefront glass in a row, 40 of them, and then 60, and the last dozen had nowhere to lean, so Ruiz laid them flat on the pavement on top of flattened boxes. Marissa worked the archive herself and let nobody else touch it. She went down the rows the way she had built them, 2015 through 2019 on the top shelf, the muslin toiles under the window, the drafting rolls in the tube rack by the stairs, and she called each box out loud as she sealed it so the number stayed in her mouth. 19 boxes. She got to 19 and stopped and went back and counted the shelf, and there were 20 spaces. Delilah, the 2017 book. It's in the van. Say the number on the lid. Delilah went to the van and came back. 17. Then we're missing 18. Marissa stood in front of the gap on the shelf with her hand flat against the wood. The dust line was clean. Something had come off that shelf, and it had come off recently, and it had not come off during the last 90 minutes. The supervisor cleared his throat by the door and tapped the face of his watch, and she let it go, because there was no version of that conversation that ended with the box on the sidewalk. By 9:10, there were phones. 3 at first, from across the street, held low. Then a man stopped his bicycle and filmed with 1 foot on the curb. Then a woman with a stroller filmed and narrated to her own camera, and Marissa could hear the shape of her own name in the narration without hearing the words. Delilah moved to stand between the lenses and the boxes. Let them, Marissa said. They're not filming the building. I know what they're filming. She lifted the next box. Let them. The bindery across the street had been dark since December, and at 9:25 a woman unlocked it and went inside with a clipboard, and lights came on in a shop that had been off the market for 7 months. Marissa saw it happen over the top of a box of patterns. She stood in the street with 140 pounds of paper in her arms and watched a door open that nobody had been allowed to rent, and something in her chest went cold and clear and stopped hurting. She set the box down on the tailgate and wrote in the fabric marker, on the cardboard flap, Bindery open, 9:25, woman with clipboard. The locksmith started on the front cylinder at 9:48. He worked with his back to her. The supervisor asked her to hand over both sets of keys, and she took her own ring apart in her palm, key by key, and put 5 keys into his hand and kept the 6th, and he looked at the 6th. That one's a storage unit. He nodded and wrote something. Catherine came out last, carrying the brass card stand from the mannequin's feet under her arm like a rolled newspaper. Nobody had told her to take it. She put it in the van herself and shut the door. At 10:02, the marshal's paper went into the window, and Marissa read the last line of it through the glass from the outside, standing on a public sidewalk in front of her own name. Someone in the crowd asked, loudly, whether this was the woman from the video. Marissa turned toward the voice. 9 or 10 phones came up together, and she gave them 11 seconds of her face, and then she said the only sentence she said on that sidewalk. The lease is terminated. The business isn't. It was on the internet by noon, with 3 different captions, and none of them were hers. Adrian called while the van was still loading and listened to the sound of the street for a moment before she spoke. Are you out? I'm out. Then hear me carefully. The holding company that just evicted you, and the office that made you 3 offers to buy, share a registered agent. Same address, same suite, same floor. I pulled it an hour ago. Marissa switched the phone to her other ear. That's not the same as proof. It's not. A registered agent serves 40 companies. Adrian's pen was moving again. But 40 companies don't all want your building. Marissa, do you still have the second envelope? The cream one, hand-delivered, no name? It's in a drawer that isn't mine anymore. Get it today. She got it at 11:20 from a box already loaded and put it in her coat pocket, and it stayed there for the rest of the day against her hip like a stone. Storage was on 9th, Unit 4C, 2nd floor, 40 by 20, $11 a day, and a rolling steel door that had to be lifted with both hands. They filled it by 2 in the afternoon. Delilah built an aisle down the middle out of the bolt racks so a person could walk. Ruiz hung 1 work lamp from the ceiling grid and taped the cord to the wall so nobody would take it down by the neck. At 2:40, Catherine sat on a box and told her. Halloran's went to somebody else for the spring alterations. You've done Halloran's for 6 years. 7. She took her glasses off the beaded chain and put them on and took them off again. That's 4 now. The bridal shop on Delancey said their insurer flagged it. The costume house said nothing at all, which is worse, and Beckwith's office called my daughter's school. Marissa put down the tape she was holding. Called it for what? To confirm enrollment. For a scholarship committee that doesn't exist. Catherine's voice stayed level, and her hands did not. Somebody wanted me to know they knew where she is. The lamp swung a little on its cord, because Ruiz had brushed it going past. I'll pay her tuition. With what, Marissa? With the check in the drawer, if it comes to that. She said it flatly, and she heard herself say it, and so did Delilah, and nobody spoke for a second. It hasn't come to that. Don't. Catherine stood up. Don't you dare take his money for my kid. I said no in that house in front of 30 people, and I'm not going to have it turn out. I was just holding out for a better offer. Catherine. I have 21 years. I can sew. She pushed the glasses up into her hair. What I can't do is watch you cash it on a Tuesday because of me. She went down the stairs to smoke, which she had not done in 9 years. Delilah watched the door swing. Her rent's due on the first 2. I know. And mine is. I know that. I'm not asking you for anything. Delilah pulled a bolt straight on the rack. I'm telling you so you stop doing the math with only your own name in it. Delilah waited until the door clanged. They didn't call that school to scare Catherine. No, they called it so you'd take the check. Delilah leaned on the rack. Whoever's doing this wants you paid off and quiet. That's not a woman who got embarrassed at her own fitting. That's a business with a schedule. Marissa looked at the wall of bolts and did not answer, because the answer she had was not yet a sentence. They left at 9. She said she would follow in 20 minutes, and she did not follow. At 2 a.m., the corridor lights on the second floor of the storage building were on a motion timer that gave you 4 minutes. Marissa learned that by standing still and losing them twice. She lifted the steel door with both hands, ducked under, and pulled the chain for the work lamp. Eternité was in the long garment case, laid flat across 2 trestles because there was no rail high enough to hang it. She had not opened it since the morning they came home from the hill. There had been the article and the lawsuit and the check and the sidewalk, and every one of those had been a reason not to open it, and she knew that, and she had let herself have the reasons. She unzipped the case from the shoulder down and folded the flap back. The bodice was there, 12 bones, the ivory silk browned at the left hip where the linen had lain, the beads gone gray with heat, in a crescent the width of her forearm. Below that there was case lining. She stood very still. Then she put both hands under the bodice and lifted, the way you lift something to check what's underneath. And the whole lower half came up weightless, and the skirt ended 9 inches below the waist seam, in a raw, cut edge. Not burned, cut. The burn had taken a crescent through 4 layers. This was a line. Somebody had run a blade along the inside of the waist stay and taken the entire lower skirt off the dress, and with it, the outermost embroidered panel. The last 3 years of work, the blue at the hip, the 140 beads she had set, 8 days before Yeren walked through her door. Marissa turned the waist seam toward the lamp and looked at the cut. It was clean. It was a rotary blade or a very good shear, taken along a straight edge, by a hand that knew to cut inside the stay so the bodice wouldn't unravel and show it. Somebody who understood the garment had taken the part of the garment worth understanding. She ran her thumb along it from the side seam to the center back, and the edge did not catch once. Fabric that tears catches. This was one pass, one direction, no hesitation mark at the start, and none at the finish. She sat down on the concrete with the top of her life in her lap. The sound she made was small and it did not last long, and there was nobody in the building to hear it, and she stopped it herself with the back of her wrist. Then she got up. She went to the case and checked the pockets. The glassine envelope was there, 4 beads, from the spool she had bought at 22, still 4. She took out her phone and photographed the cut edge in 7 frames, ruler laid alongside, the way Adrian had taught her to photograph the burn. She wrote on the outside of the case in fabric marker, "Opened 2:14 a.m., Unit 4C, lower skirt absent, cut not torn." Then she stood in the aisle Delilah had built and made herself think it through, because grief could wait and the timeline could not. She counted the days backward on her fingers, out loud, in an empty room. The case had been sealed in the atelier. It had gone into the van at 9:40 that morning under Ruiz's hands, and out of the van at 1:05 under Delilah's, and it had been in Unit 4C since 2 in the afternoon, with a padlock she had bought herself, and 1 key on a ring in her coat. And before that, for 4 days, it had sat in the back atelier of a shop where a locksmith had changed the cylinder while she watched from the street. She lifted the bodice, laid it flat, and pinned a strip of muslin along the cut edge to keep the stay from working loose. 31 pins. Her hands were steady for the last 19. At 3:40, she photographed the empty half of the case and sent all 8 images to Adrian Whitlock with 4 words. They came back for it. At 3:52, a car came up the ramp on the outside of the building, and the sound of it stopped 1 floor below, and did not leave. Marissa reached up and killed the work lamp. The engine below her shut off, and a door opened, and 1 set of footsteps came up the concrete stairs. Marissa put her hand flat on the muslin she had just pinned, because the pins were the only sharp thing within reach, and she had no intention of using them. The steps stopped outside 4C, knuckles on steel, twice, unhurried. "It's Kang Tae-jun," the voice said. "I'm alone." I'll wait out here if you want. She rolled the door up 11 inches and looked at his shoes. Then she rolled it the rest of the way. He had a folio under his arm. Do-yoon's, the leather one, thicker now by half. His hands were still wrapped at the base of 2 fingers on the left. He looked past her at the cavaletti, at the bodice standing alone above nothing, and his jaw moved once. Do-yoon's downstairs in the car, he said. He wouldn't come up. He said this belongs to you, and he'd rather not be in the room when you read it. Read what? 8 months of my own company. He held the folio out. Started before I met you. It has nothing to do with the dress. That's why it matters. She took it and did not open it. She carried it to the cutting table under the dead work lamp, switched the lamp back on, and set the folio down, square to the edge of the table, the way she set a pattern down. Say it in 1 sentence first, she said. If the sentence is worth it, I'll read the rest. Taejun stayed by the door. Seo Group has been trying to buy Pierce Atelier for a year. The lamp hummed. Marissa put both palms on the table. Say the second sentence. The engagement was the instrument. She opened the folio. The first 11 pages were corporate registrations, the boring kind, a chain of holding companies with names like weather reports. Do-yoon had done what auditors do. He had drawn lines in blue pen from one registered agent to the next, and every line ended in the same room number on the same floor of the same building. The room number Adrian had read to her on the sidewalk that morning, while 60 rolls of silk leaned against her own window. Page 12 was a purchase committee memo, dated the previous October, a single-page list of target acquisitions, ranked, 12 independent houses across 3 cities. Pierce Atelier was line 1. Read the column on the right, Taejun said. The column was headed Acquisition Route. Beside line 1, 3 words. Lease pressure preferred. Marissa turned the page slowly, the way you turn a page you already know the end of. The rent letter she had held in her own hands on the first morning was reproduced in the file, 11 days before Delilah brought it to her. The third buyout envelope, the cream one, no name, still in her coat pocket 6 feet away, was reproduced with the sender's letterhead intact. The letterhead was a law office. The law office had 1 client listed on the retainer schedule. Beckwith, she said out loud. They also make the phone calls, Taejun said, to colleges, when it's useful. She stopped. She put her finger on the line and looked up at him. Catherine's daughter is in that folio? Page 41. A billing entry. 9 minutes. His voice did not change. They bill for it, Marissa. That's the part I couldn't get past. She sat down on a rolled bolt of canvas, because standing had stopped being useful. Page 50 was the freight schedule. It was not a schedule of trucks. It was a schedule of access. 16 ports of entry, 4 bonded warehouses, and the customs brokerage that cleared 80% of European silk into the eastern half of the country. Every one of them ran through Kang. That's yours, she said. That's my father's, and then mine. It's moved cloth for 40 years. He came 2 steps in, no further. A house like yours doesn't die because someone burns a dress. It dies because the silk takes 9 weeks instead of 9 days, and the buyer goes elsewhere. CO can buy a building. CO can't slow a shipment. And a marriage. A marriage merges the boards. He said it flatly, the way a man reads back his own confession. 12 houses on that list. Squeeze the lease, refuse the shipping, buy the name at the bottom of the market, then license the name back out. You were first because you were smallest, and because you were the only one on the list who owns her own archive. Marissa turned to page 58. A columned projection, 4 years, with a heading she read twice. Post-consolidation, domestic couture, independent share. The last figure in the column was 0. She closed the folio, she kept her hand on it. So she didn't walk into my shop, she said. No. She walked 9 steps to a dress she'd already seen in a file. Marissa's mouth went hard. She asked twice who owned the place. Twice. Because the file had the shop and the archive and the 10 years, Taejun said. The file didn't have your face. Nobody had ever bothered to write down what you looked like. You weren't a person in that document. You were line 1. Marissa stood up. That's why she burned it, she said. Taejun waited. She didn't burn it because I embarrassed her. Marissa's voice came down to almost nothing, which was worse. She burned it because I appeared. She had a plan for a supplier. She had no plan for an owner standing in her father's house saying you're looking at her. The fire wasn't strategy. The fire was her losing. Yes, and when you canceled the wedding, I tore out the first piece of the machine before it turned once, he said. The rest of it is still assembled. It's just missing me. She laughed. One breath of it. No humor in it at all. That's why the eviction came in 4 days. That's why the magazine got a phone call about freight. That's why the second freelance job left Catherine on a Tuesday. She put her palm flat on the folio again. They're not punishing me, they're finishing the schedule. Faster now, Taejun said. You cost them a year. Marissa walked to the far end of the unit, where the 20 shelf spaces of her archive had become 19 boxes stacked in a corridor Delilah had built out of garment racks. Box 18, she said. 19 boxes, 20 spaces. Someone took box 18 off my shelf before the marshal ever knocked, and the same week, someone cut 9 inches below the waist seam of a dress, from the inside of the interfacing, clean, so it wouldn't fray. She turned around. That's not a thief. A thief takes the whole case. Is that in your file? Something moved in his face for the first time. No, he said. Then say what you think. Box 18 is your oldest patterns, 19-year drafts, your blocks. He said it like a man reading a balance sheet and disliking the total. If you own the archive, they can't license the name. If they own the archive, they don't need me at all. She nodded slowly. And the skirt panel is the proof of authorship. 3 years of embroidery with my hand in it. Without the panel, all anyone can show a court is a burnt bodice and my word. Do-yoon can find where a truck went, Taejun said. He can't find where a bolt of fabric went. That's craft. That's your side of the wall. It's a woman who knows how to work in interfacing, Marissa said. There are maybe 40 of those in this city, and about 9 of them are hungry enough right now, because 4 of Catherine's clients just found new hands. Her chin came up. I know who to call. Not tonight. She walked back and picked up the cream envelope from her coat and dropped it on the folio, so it sat there, the corner of one lying across the corner of the other. That envelope came to my door 3 times, she said. Same lawyers, same clause. 36 months as a creative consultant. In my own building, I couldn't understand why anyone would pay above value for a dress shop. She tapped the folio twice. Now I do. They weren't paying for the shop. They were paying for the last year of my life, so it wouldn't be theirs by force. Taejun said nothing, which was the correct answer, and she noticed that he knew it was. Why did you bring this here? She said. You could have sent it to my lawyer. I could have. You could have sent it with the check. The check was a mistake. He looked at the bodice on the cavaletti, the burned crescent, the gray beads. You told me why at the door. If I pay, she never pays. I've had 11 days to find a better answer, and there isn't one. So, I'm not paying. I'm handing over evidence, and then I'm going to stand somewhere you can see me. Where? Wherever you tell me to stand. Marissa looked at him for a while. Steel walls, a work lamp, $11 a day. I want to be clear about something before I take one more page from you, she said. The file goes to Adrian Whitlock tonight, and to Vincent Marchetti with it. Not sealed, not embargoed, not held for leverage in a settlement conference. It goes out. That's what I hoped for. It puts your family's freight network in every article about this. It puts my father's network in every article about this, he said. He's been dead 4 years, and the networks had my name on it for 3. I'd rather it be in the article as the thing that refused. There'll be a version where you look like the man who was engaged to it. There'll be a version where that's true. She almost smiled. She didn't let it finish. Second thing, she said, you'll want to offer me people, cars outside, someone in the stairwell, a man in a jacket who walks Catherine to her car. Taejun's mouth opened. Don't, Marissa said. Not one. Not tonight. Not next month. Someone cut your dress open inside a locked case. I know what happened. I was on the floor of this unit at 2 in the morning counting it. She stepped in until there was a foot of air between them, and she did not lower her voice. If your men stand at my door, then in every telling of this, for the rest of my life, I'm the woman the Snow Wolf protected. Not the woman who owned the archive. Not the woman who won. Protected. I've been somebody's supplier already this month. I'm not being somebody's ward. His hands closed slightly, and the wrap on the 2 fingers pulled. Then what do I do? He said. You be equal or you be nothing, she said it once, evenly. You give me what you have, files, testimony, your name on a deposition if Adrian asks for it, and you take the same risk I take, in public, with a lawyer, in daylight. No favors, nothing you can take back if I disappoint you. Equal or nothing. The unit was very quiet. Somewhere below, a car door closed, Do-yoon, giving up on waiting inside. Equal, Taejun said. Say the rest of it. I'll sit for the deposition. I'll produce the shipping records with my own signature on the disclosure. My counsel will hate every hour of it. He paused. And I don't come here again unless you ask me to. That's right. That's going to be difficult. It's supposed to be. She picked up the folio and held it against her chest with her forearm, the burned one, the bandage gray now at the edge, and walked past him and rolled the steel door up all the way so the corridor light came in and the whole ugly rented room was visible. The racks, the 19 boxes, the bolts on the floor, the half of a dress on 2 sawhorses. Look at it, she said. Then go tell whoever asks that this is what line 1 looks like. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he went down the stairs. Marissa did not watch the car leave. She sat on the canvas bolt with the folio open on her knees and read all 140 pages, in order, without skipping, and it took her until 6:15. At 6:20, she called Adrian Whitlock and said 4 sentences. At 6:41, Adrian called back and said 1, don't move, don't copy, don't photograph, I'm coming with a courier and a notary. At 7:15, Adrian came up the stairs in a plum suit with the oxblood briefcase and a woman in a windbreaker carrying a scanner, and she read page 12 standing up and put her hand over her own mouth and took it away again. Line 1, Adrian said. Line 1. Marissa, this isn't a destruction case anymore. Destruction was the tantrum. She flipped to page 50. This is a coordinated scheme to acquire a competitor through economic duress. The fire is now evidence of motive. In a much uglier action, and I am adding 2 defendants who are not a 31-year-old woman with a diamond over a glove. Her father, and the holding, and the law firm, because the law firm made a phone call to a 19-year-old's registrar and billed for it. Adrian pushed her glasses up. That call is the one that ends careers. That's not litigation. That's a bar complaint with a case number attached. How long? To file? Tomorrow, 4 p.m. To settle? Adrian looked at the shelves, the corridor of racks, the $11 door. They'll want confidentiality, and they'll want it before Marchetti prints. So the question is yours, not mine. If you want money, take it Friday. If you want the file public, you take less and you take it slower. Marissa was already dialing. Vincent Marchetti picked up on the second ring at 7:52 in the morning. "Vincent," she said, "you told me not to let anyone clean the burnt one." "I did. I have 140 pages that say why my rent went up in a month when I'd never met the woman who burned it." She looked at Adrian. "And you told me your print feature got pulled because 2 ad pages belonged to a group with a freight parent." The line was silent for 4 seconds. "Say the name of the freight parent," Marchetti said, and his voice had gone somewhere flat and young. "It's on page 52, cross-referenced on 55. Marissa let it sit. "Vincent, you weren't killed by an advertiser. You were killed by a defendant." She heard a chair move. She heard a door shut somewhere in a building across the city. 6 pages was the feature, Marchetti said. 6 pages was fashion. This is the front of the book, and the front of the book doesn't sell ads. It makes them apologize. A pause. "Can I have it exclusively for 9 days? Adrian, listening, held up 7 fingers. 7, Marissa said. "And the burnt panel gets photographed here, in this unit, on these sawhorses, under this lamp. Not in a studio. I don't want it pretty." "Christ," Marchetti said, delighted, appalled. 7. "Don't answer your phone." Marissa put the phone face down on the folio, and for the first time in 11 days, she left it that way on purpose. Adrian filed at 4 o'clock the next afternoon. 3 defendants, 6 counts, 140 pages, attached as Exhibit A, nothing sealed. The story ran 9 days later, front of the book, 11 pages instead of 6, and the photograph that opened it was a bodice on 2 sawhorses in a storage unit, with a black crescent burned through the hip. The sponsors that had left Marissa in 9 hours left CO Yerin in 6. Kwangmin's holding lost the freight-linked partner first, then the customs brokerage, then the building itself, and on a Thursday in the 5th month, the Seo Group settled all 6 counts before a single deposition of Kang Tae-jun was ever read into the record, and the settlement carried no confidentiality clause because Adrian had refused it in writing 3 times, and the 4th time nobody asked. Marissa did not rent 214 Adler Street. She bought it. The bindery next door was still on the market by then, and she bought that too, and knocked 1 wall, and put the archive, 20 boxes, box 18 recovered in month 3 from a fitting studio in the garment district, run by a woman who had taken a job she should have refused and gave everything back the moment a lawyer said the word. Conversion. On new steel shelves with her own lock. The lower skirt of Eternité was never recovered. The embroidered panel came back in pieces, cut for reuse. She did not restore it. She took the 4 oldest panels, the ones from the first 2 years, the ones with the beads off the spool she'd bought at 22, and made them the spine of something else, and she built a new skirt out from them in a color that had not existed in the first dress, and she left the burn where it was. The black crescent ran across the left hip, 4 layers deep, exactly where Yerin's linen had landed. Catherine Vance traced it in gold thread. 11 days of couching, by hand, in the north light of a room Marissa owned. She followed the scorch line, stitch for stitch, and did not straighten it once. They called the dress Rebirth. 9 months after the fire, it closed the spring show at the end of a runway with Marissa's name over the door of the building the show was standing in. Delilah Frost sat front row with her reading glasses on their beaded chain, and next to her Catherine, and next to Catherine, a girl of 19, home from her 2nd year. Marchetti's cover line, out that morning, was 6 words. They burned 10 years and made it priceless. Kang Tae-jun stood at the back, behind the last row of chairs, with everyone else, because that was where she had told him to stand, and he had never once tried to stand anywhere better. When the lights came up, she walked the length of the room to him herself, past every person who had ever called her a supplier. She was not protected. She was not rescued. She was the owner, crossing her own floor. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever poured 10 years of your own hands into something and watched someone destroy it in 10 seconds? Have you ever been treated as the help inside a place you built with your own name over the door? And when they offered you money to make it quiet, did you take it? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, craftsmanship, and justice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.